The cabin of Flight 223 from New York to Los Angeles hummed with the low, restless buzz of a plane delayed too long. Outside, a late spring storm churned the sky, bruising it with heavy gray clouds that flickered with distant lightning. Inside, the air felt thick, stale with recycled oxygen and the faint tang of impatience. Passengers shifted in their seats, some tapping phones with restless thumbs, others staring blankly at the safety cards they'd already memorized. The fasten seatbelt sign glowed a stubborn amber above, a silent warning keeping everyone tethered to their spots. It was the kind of delay that made people edgy, the kind that turned a routine flight into a pressure cooker waiting for a spark. In Seat 1C, Jasmine Carter sat quietly, her 8-month-old daughter, Ava, cradled against her chest. She was 32, with a face that carried both strength and exhaustion, deep brown eyes framed by lashes still damp from the hurried dash through JFK's terminal, skin glowing faintly under the dim cabin lights. Her braids were pulled back into a neat bun, a few loose strands curling at her temples, and she wore a simple navy blazer over a cream blouse, professional yet soft, the kind of outfit that said she belonged anywhere she chose to be. Beneath a thin blanket, Ava nursed, her tiny hands clutching at Jasmine's shirt, oblivious to the brewing storm outside or the brewing tension inside. Jasmine didn't notice the stares at first. She was too focused on Ava's soft breaths, the rhythm of them syncing with her own heartbeat. It had been a long day, meetings with investors in Manhattan, a tense call with her ex-husband Ethan about their shared airline, and now this flight, already an hour behind schedule. She just wanted to get home to LA, to her small apartment with its wide windows and Ava's crib tucked in the corner. She adjusted the blanket slightly, making sure it draped over her shoulder, not for Shemesh long since shed that, but for the quiet privacy she craved in a space full of strangers. Across the aisle, Mike Dawson shifted in Seat 1D. 50, balding, with a ruddy face that suggested too many steaks and too little patience. He was the kind of man who wore a tailored suit but still looked uncomfortable in it. He'd been on his third whiskey since boarding, the ice clinking against the glass as he scrolled through emails on his tablet. Every few minutes, he'd glance over at Jasmine, his lips tightening into a thin line. It wasn't subtle. The first time she'd caught his eye and offered a small, polite nod, neighborly neutral. He'd looked away fast, like he'd been caught doing something he shouldn't. The second time, he didn't bother hiding it. His muttered, "This isn't a daycare," carried just far enough to pierce the hum of the engines. Jasmine's fingers paused on Ava's back. She heard it, clear as day, and felt the familiar prickle of heat creeping up her neck. She didn't turn her head, didn't give him the satisfaction of a reaction, not yet. She'd dealt with men like Mike before, loud enough to complain, quiet enough to dodge consequences. Instead, she kept her eyes on the window, where rain streaked the glass in jagged lines, and let Ava's warmth anchor her. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one she could feel brewing in her gut. The first-class cabin was small, intimate in a way that made every sound sharper, every glance heavier. 12 seats, all leather and polished wood, with a curtain separating them from the chaos of economy behind. A woman in 2A, Sarah Lopez, flipped through a magazine, her manicured nails tapping the pages. She was 45, sharp-eyed and stylish in a silk scarf and blazer, the kind of frequent flyer who knew the crew by name. She'd smiled at Jasmine earlier when they boarded, a quick, cute baby, tossed her way before settling in. Now she seemed oblivious, lost in her reading or pretending to be. Further back, near the galley, Tyler Hayes fumbled with a tray of water glasses. At 29, he was the newest flight attendant on the crew, all nervous energy and gangly limbs, his uniform still stiff with fresh creases. He'd been watching the passengers since takeoff, trying to read the room, but the delay had thrown him off. He caught Mike's mutter too, his hazel eyes darting to Jasmine, then away, like he wasn't sure if he should say something. He didn't. Then came the click of heels on the carpeted aisle. Kelly Sanders emerged from the galley like a storm front rolling into all 38, with blonde hair pulled into a tight chignon and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her uniform was impeccable, navy skirt pressed to a razor's edge, name tag glinting under the lights. She'd been lead attendant for years, the kind of woman who ran her cabin like a fiefdom, all rules and clipped efficiency. She stopped beside Jasmine's seat, arms crossed, her shadow falling over the blanket. "Ma'am," she said, voice low but edged with steel, "can I help you with something?" Jasmine looked up, meeting Kelly's gaze. Those isis blue and unyielding felt like they were sizing her up, not as a passenger, but as an intruder. "No, thank you," Jasmine said softly, shifting Ava slightly. "We're fine." Kelly's lips twitched, a flicker of something disapproval, maybe that she didn't bother hiding. "You're sure?" She pressed louder now, enough that Mike's head turned. "Because this is first class. We have standards." The word landed like a slap. Standards. Jasmine's jaw tightened, but she kept her tone even. "I'm just feeding my daughter. She was hungry." Kelly didn't blink. "I can see that. But it's disruptive. Other passengers are noticing." Her eyes flicked to Mike, a silent alliance forming. He nodded faintly, emboldened, and took a slow sip of his whiskey. Jasmine felt the heat in her cheeks now, spreading fast. Disruptive. The word echoed in her head, sharp and accusing. She glanced around. Sarah had lowered her magazine, eyebrows raised. Tyler paused mid-step, water sloshing in a glass. A businessman in 3B pulled out his AirPods, suddenly interested. The cabin wasn't big enough to hide from this. Every eye was on her, or pretending not to be. "I'm covered," Jasmine said, lifting the blanket slightly to prove it. "I'm not breaking any rules." Kelly leaned in, her voice dropping to a hiss that somehow carried further. "It's not about rules. It's about consideration. People paid a lot for these seats." The air shifted. Tyler's tray clattered softly as he set it down, his hands unsteady. Sarah's magazine hit her lap with a thud. Mike smirked, leaning back like he'd just won something. And Jasmine felt the weight of it all pressing down. The stares, the judgment, the unspoken assumption that she didn't belong. Not here, not in first class, not with her baby and her blanket and her quiet defiance. She could have shrunk. She could have apologized, gathered Ava, and slipped away to the cramped lavatory like Kelly wanted. But something in her snapped, not loud, not wild, just a quiet, burning resolve. She'd paid for this seat. She'd built this airline, or half of it, with Ethan years ago, before the divorce, before the sleepless nights with Ava. She wasn't moving. "I'm staying here," she said, voice steady, eyes locked on Kelly's. "If it bothers anyone, they can complain to me directly." Kelly's face hardened, a flush creeping up her neck. Mike coughed into his glass, caught off guard. Sarah's lips curved into a faint, approving smile. And in the galley, Tyler's mouth opened, then closed, like he'd almost said something but thought better of it. The storm outside rumbled louder, a low growl that vibrated through the fuselage. But inside, the real tempest was just beginning. Jasmine held Ava closer, her heart pounding, not from fear, but from the certainty that this wasn't over. She didn't know Kelly was about to double down, didn't know Mike would escalate, didn't know the passengers filming on their phones would catch every word. All she knew was the weight of her daughter in her arms and the fire in her chest that refused to be snuffed out. And somewhere 30,000 feet below, Ethan Brooks was checking his phone, oblivious to the message about to light up his screen. The cabin of Flight 223 felt smaller now, the air tighter, as if the walls themselves were leaning in to watch. The storm outside battered the plane with gusts that rattled the windows, but inside, it was Kelly Sanders' voice that cut through the Huma blade wrapped in velvet, sharp and deliberate. She stood over Jasmine Carter, arms still crossed, her icy blue eyes narrowed like she'd just been challenged to a duel she intended to win. "Ma'am," Kelly said, louder this time, her tone dripping with authority, "I'm not asking. I'm telling you. You need to cover up better or take it to the restroom." Now. The word now landed like a gavel, final and unyielding, meant to silence any resistance. Jasmine didn't flinch. She held Ava closer, the baby's soft warmth pressing against her chest, a lifeline in the storm of judgment swirling around her. Her heart hammered, but her voice stayed steady low, the kind of calm that carried more weight than a shout. "I'm covered," she said, tugging the blanket slightly to emphasize it. "And I'm not moving. My daughter's eating. That's not a crime." Kelly's flush deepened, creeping from her neck to her cheeks, a crack in her polished armor. She wasn't used to pushback, not here, not in first class, where passengers usually bent to her rules with a nod and a "yes, ma'am." She leaned closer, her shadow swallowing the light over Jasmine's seat. "It's not about crime. It's about decorum. People paid thousands for this cabin, not to watch." She paused, searching for the right word, then landed on it with a sneer that. The word hung there, ugly and naked, stripping away any pretense of professionalism. Jasmine felt it like a punch to the gut, the implication clear. That was her baby, her blackness, her motherhood, all of it somehow out of place in Kelly's pristine vision of first class. Her fingers tightened around Ava, nails digging into her palms beneath the blanket. She wanted to stand, to scream, to tear apart the smug certainty in Kelly's face, but she didn't. Not yet. She'd learned long ago that rage could wait. Clarity couldn't. Across the aisle, Mike Dawson snorted into his whiskey, emboldened by Kelly's stance. "Exactly," he said, loud enough for the whole cabin to hear. "Some of us want peace, not a nursery." He set his glass down with a clink, leaning forward, his ruddy face smug. "Take it to the back, lady." The cabin erupted not in chaos, but in a low electric murmur. Heads turned. Phones lifted. A man in 3B, suit crisp and AirPods dangling, smirked as he tapped his screen recording. A woman in 2C adjusted her glasses, whispering to her seatmate. The tension was a live wire now, sparking through the leather seats and polished trays. Tyler Hayes froze near the galley, a water glass trembling in his hand, his wide eyes darting between Kelly and Jasmine like he was watching a train wreck he couldn't stop. Jasmine's gaze flicked to Mike, then back to Kelly. She could feel the weight of every stare, the silent judgment cloaking her like damp wool. But then something shifted. Anger hardened into resolve, a steel rod straightening her spine. She stood, slow and deliberate, Ava still cradled against her. At 32 she wasn't tall, but in that moment she towered. The blanket slipped slightly, revealing nothing but a mother holding her child, and she didn't bother fixing it. "If you're so bothered, Mike," she said, her voice ringing clear through the cabin, "ask for a new seat. I paid for this one. I'm staying." She turned to Kelly, eyes locking with hers. "And you don't get to tell me where I belong." The words landed like thunder, rolling through the cabin and shaking the fragile truce of silence. Kelly's mouth opened, then closed, her composure cracking like thin ice. Mike's smirk faltered, his hand pausing halfway to his glass. For a split second, the plane itself seemed to hold its breath, the storm outside a distant echo to the one unfolding within. Then Sarah Lopez spoke. She'd been quiet until now, her magazine resting in her lap, but her voice cut through the murmur like a lifeline. "She's right," Sarah said, tossing her scarf over her shoulder with a flick. "She's just feeding her kid. What's the big deal? You're making this a scene, not her." Her sharp eyes pinned Kelly, then Mike, daring them to argue. Kelly whipped around, her heels digging into the carpet. "Stay out of this," she snapped, her voice rising. "This is between me and her." "No, it's not," Sarah shot back unfazed. "You're yelling at her in front of all of us. If you've got a problem, take it up with the airline, not a mom with a baby." The cabin buzzed louder now, a chorus of whispers and rustling seats. A woman in 2C muttered, "Ridiculous," under her breath. The man in 3B zoomed his phone in, grinning like he'd struck gold. Tyler took a hesitant step forward, then stopped, his tray clattering softly as he set it down. He looked at Jasmine, then Kelly, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed hard. Kelly's face was a mask of fury now, her control slipping through her fingers like sand. "Enough!" she barked, loud enough to startle Ava, who whimpered against Jasmine's chest. "I'm the lead attendant here. You don't get to argue with me. Either cover up properly, go to the restroom, or I'm calling security when we land. Your choice." The threat hung heavy, a guillotine blade poised to drop. Jasmine's chest tightened, not from fear, but from the sheer absurdity of its security. For feeding her daughter? She rocked Ava gently, soothing her, but her eyes never left Kelly's. "Call them," she said, voice low and lethal. "Let's see what they say about a mother in a seat she paid for." Mike laughed, a harsh grating sound. "Oh, come on. Just go already. You're holding up the whole flight." "Holding up the flight?" Jasmine turned to him, her calm cracking just enough to let the fire through. "We've been stuck here for an hour because of the storm, not me. You want someone to blame? Look outside." The cabin erupted again, this time with voices, not just murmurs. "She's got a point," someone called from 3A. "Leave her alone," another voice chimed in, sharp and female. The man in 3B chuckled, muttering, "This is going viral," as his phone stayed steady. Sarah crossed her arms, nodding at Jasmine like they'd just formed an unspoken alliance. Kelly's head snapped between Jasmine and the growing unrest, her authority unraveling with every word. "Quiet!" she shouted, her voice shrill now, slicing through the noise. "All of you quiet, or I'll report this to the captain." She pointed at Jasmine, her finger trembling. "And you're done asking. Move, or I'll make sure you regret it." The threat was a match to gasoline. The cabin flared, passengers shifting, voices rising, phones flashing. Tyler finally moved, stepping into the aisle, his voice shaky but audible. Kelly, maybe we should." "Stay out of it, Tyler." Kelly whirled on him, her eyes blazing. "You're new. You don't get a say." He flinched but didn't back down completely, his hands clenching at his sides. Jasmine caught his eye, a quick, fleeting glance, and saw something there. Fear, yes, but also a flicker of guilt, like he wanted to help but didn't know how. The standoff stretched taut, a wire ready to snap. Jasmine stood her ground, Ava's whimpers fading as she rocked her gently, her own breathing steady despite the chaos. Kelly's chest heaved, her face a mix of rage and desperation. Mike leaned back, smirking again, content to watch the fire he'd helped light. Sarah kept her gaze locked on Kelly, unyielding. And the passengers, some angry, some amused, some just tired, kept their phones up, capturing every second. Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating the cabin in a stark white glare. The plane jolted slightly, a reminder of the storm still holding them hostage. But inside, it was Jasmine's quiet defiance that shook the ground. She didn't know Kelly was about to escalate, didn't know Ethan's phone was buzzing with her message, didn't know the captain was already reaching for the intercom. All she knew was the weight of her daughter in her arms and the line she'd drawn in the sand dune she wouldn't cross, no matter who tried to push her. The spark had caught. The fire was spreading. And in the galley, a single text glowed on Jasmine's phone, unanswered for now. "What's happening? I'm calling the crew." Ethan's words, a lifeline she didn't yet need, but one that would soon pull her through the flames. The first-class cabin of Flight 223 crackled with tension, a live wire stretched to its breaking point. Jasmine Carter stood firm in the aisle, Ava cradled against her chest, her dark eyes boring into Kelly Sanders like twin flames refusing to flicker out. Kelly's face was a mask of fury, her blonde chignon fraying at the edges as her authority crumbled under the weight of Jasmine's defiance and the growing unrest around her. Passengers murmured, phones glowed, and the storm outside roared a chaotic symphony that drowned out the plane's steady hum. Kelly's last threat still echoed, "Move, or I'll make sure you regret it," and the words hung there, heavy and brittle, daring someone to snap them. Mike Dawson smirked from his seat, whiskey glass in hand, his smugness a silent cheer for Kelly's crumbling campaign. Sarah Lopez sat with arms crossed, her sharp gaze daring Kelly to push further. Tyler Hayes lingered near the galley, his tray abandoned, his hands twitching like he wanted to act but didn't know how. The air was thick with anticipation, every breath a countdown to the next explosion. Jasmine didn't waver. She rocked Ava gently, soothing the baby's soft whimpers, but her stance was granite unmoving, unbreakable. "Go ahead," she said, her voice a quiet blade slicing through Kelly's bluster. "Call security. Let's see who regrets what." Kelly's lips parted, a retort forming, but before she could fire it, a sharp ding cut through the noise. The intercom crackled to life, and the captain's voice, calm, authoritative, tinged with a hint of irritation, filled the cabin. "Lead Attendant Kelly Sanders, report to the cockpit immediately." The words landed like a thunderclap, silencing the murmurs, freezing the phone's mid-frame. Kelly's head jerked up, her flesh draining to a sickly pallor. Mike's smirk vanished, his glass clinking awkwardly against the tray. Sarah's eyebrows lifted, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Tyler exhaled, a shaky breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Jasmine didn't move, didn't blink, but her eyes followed Kelly with a stillness that spoke louder than any shout. Kelly straightened, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands, her heels clicking as she turned. "This isn't over," she hissed at Jasmine, low enough that only those closest heard it. Then she marched down the aisle, her stride stiff, her shadow shrinking with every step. Passengers watched her go, some with curiosity, others with thinly veiled satisfaction. The man in 3B muttered, "Oh, she's toast," as he zoomed his camera on her retreating back. Jasmine sank back into her seat, adjusting Ava against her shoulder. Her pulse raced, but she kept her face composed, her breathing slow. She didn't know what had triggered the captain's call, didn't know that her phone, tucked in her bag, held a message from Ethan Brooks that had already set the wheels spinning. All she knew was that the tide had shifted, and she wasn't the one drowning. In the cockpit, Captain Daniel Reese leaned back in his chair, the glow of the instrument panel casting shadows across his weathered face. At 52, he'd seen his share of mid-flight dramas, drunk passengers, medical emergencies, even a fistfight over an armrest once, but this was new. The co-pilot, a younger man named Greg, adjusted his headset, frowning at the radar as the storm flickered on the screen. The direct line from ground ops buzzed again, and Reese picked it up with a sigh. "Captain Reese," he said, his voice gravelly from too many years barking orders. The voice on the other end was crisp, urgent, unmistakable. "Ethan Brooks, co-owner of the Airline, a man whose name alone could move mountains in this company." "Captain, it's Ethan. We've got a situation in first class. My ex-wife, Jasmine Carter, seat 1 Kesh, being harassed by your lead attendant, Kelly Sanders, for feeding our daughter." Reese's brow furrowed, his free hand tapping the armrest. "Harassed how?" "She told her to stop breastfeeding or move to the restroom," Ethan said, his tone clipped icy. "Threatened her with security. It's on video, passengers are filming. This isn't just a complaint, Dan. It's personal, and it's a liability. I want Sanders in the cockpit now." Reese exchanged a glance with Greg, who mouthed, "Breastfeeding," with a puzzled shrug. The captain rubbed his temple, the storm outside suddenly the least of his worries. "She's on her way up. What's the play here?" "Get her side," Ethan said. "Then make her apologize publicly in front of the cabin. If she refuses, she's off the plane when you land, and I'll handle the rest. Jasmine's not just a passenger, she's part owner. Sanders picked the wrong fight." Reese nodded, though Ethan couldn't see it. "Understood. We'll sort it." The line clicked off and Reese set the receiver down, muttering, "Hell of a day." Greg smirked. "Think Sanders knows who she's messing with?" Reese didn't answer, just tapped the intercom button and waited. Back in the cabin, the door to the cockpit swung open, and Kelly stepped inside, her posture rigid, her face a tight mask of defiance. She closed the door behind her, the soft thud cutting her off from the prying eyes of first class. "Captain," she said, voice steady but thin. "You called." Reese swiveled his chair, his gray eyes locking onto hers. "Sit down, Kelly. We've got a problem." She didn't sit. She stood, hands clasped behind her back, her chin lifted like she was ready for a lecture, not a reckoning. "If this is about the woman in 1C. "It is," Reese cut in, his tone flat. "You told her to stop feeding her baby. That right?" Kelly's jaw tightened. "I asked her to be discreet or move. It was visible, Captain. Other passengers were uncomfortable," Mike Dawson complained. "I was maintaining order." "Discreet?" Reese raised an eyebrow. "She had a blanket, didn't she?" "Yes, but," Kelly faltered, her hands unclenching slightly. "It wasn't enough. This is first class. There's an expectation." "Did she break any airline policy?" Reese pressed, leaning forward. "Any FAA rule? Anything in the handbook?" Kelly hesitated, her eyes darting to the side. "Technically no, but—" "No buts," Reese said. "You don't get to make up rules because you don't like what you see." He paused, letting the weight settle, then dropped the bomb. "That woman? Jasmine Carter? She's Ethan Brooks' ex-wife, co-owner of this airline. And he's on the line right now." The cockpit speaker crackled, and Ethan's voice filled the spacecom, cold, cutting like a winter wind. "Kelly, you just humiliated my wife ex-wifey in front of a cabin full of people because she was feeding our daughter. You didn't check policy. You didn't ask questions. You assumed." Kelly's face drained of color, her knees buckling slightly before she caught herself against the wall. "Tu didn't know who she was," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "You didn't need to," Ethan said, each word precise, unrelenting. "You should have treated her like any passenger with respect. Instead, you threatened her with security for doing something natural, something legal. That's not order. That's bias." The line went silent, the hum of the cockpit instruments deafening in the void. Kelly's breaths came shallow, her hands trembling as she gripped the edge of a console. Reese watched her, his expression unreadable, then spoke. "Ethan wants you to apologize. Out there, in front of everyone. You do it or you're done when we land. Your call." Kelly's eyes widened, panic flashing across her face. "Publicly? Captain, that's your mess," Reese said, cutting her off. "Fix it or we will." He nodded toward the door. "Go." She stood there, frozen for a heartbeat, her mind racing humiliation versus survival. Then she turned, her heels dragging as she opened the door. The cockpit's cool air gave way to the cabin's heat, and she stepped back into the aisle, every eye snapping to her like she was a condemned prisoner walking the plank. Jasmine sat in 1C, Ava now quiet against her chest, her own breathing steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through her. She didn't know Ethan had Cal, didn't know he'd turned the tide, but she felt it, the shift in power rippling through the cabin. Sarah watched Kelly approach, her magazine forgotten. Mike shifted uncomfortably, his whiskey suddenly less appealing. Tyler hovered near the galley, his gaze flickering between fear and hope. Kelly stopped beside Jasmine's seat, her voice trembling but loud enough to carry. "Mrs. Carter," she began, clearing her throat. I need to apologize." The cabin hushed, phones poised, waiting. Jasmine looked up, her expression calm but piercing, and in that moment, Kelly knew she wasn't just facing a passenger. She was facing a reckoning, one that wouldn't end with a simple sorry. Outside, the storm rumbled on, but inside, the real lightning was about to strike. The first-class cabin of Flight 223 hung in a breathless hush, the kind that follows a gunshot, sharp, heavy, expectant. Kelly Sanders stood beside Jasmine Carter's seat, her navy uniform crumpled at the edges, her once impeccable chignon now a tangle of loose strands. Her hands twitched at her sides, betraying the tremor she couldn't hide, and her ice-blue eyes darted across the cabin as if searching for an escape that didn't exist. The captain's order, Ethan's order, echoed in her skull. Apologize publicly or you're done. She'd walked out of the cockpit a shadow of the woman who'd stormed in, and now every passenger knew it. Jasmine sat in 1C, Ava nestled against her chest, the baby's soft breaths a quiet anchor in the storm swirling around them. Her face was calm, almost serene, but her eyes burned with a steady, unyielding fire. She didn't know Ethan had called the shots from 30,000 feet below. Didn't know the cockpit had turned the tide. She didn't need to. She'd held her ground through Kelly's threats, Mike's sneers, and the weight of a dozen stares. Now she waited not for victory but for truth. Kelly cleared her throat, the sound ragged in the silence. "Mrs. Carter," she began, her voice loud but brittle, cracking on the edges like thin glass. I need to apologize. There was a misunderstanding earlier. I shouldn't have asked you to stop feeding your baby. It was inappropriate, and I regret it." The words fell flat, hollow, a script read under duress. Passengers shifted, phones still raised, capturing every syllable, every flinch. Mike Dawson leaned back in 1D, his whiskey glass empty now, his ruddy face a mix of unease and defiance. Sarah Lopez in 2A set her magazine aside, her sharp eyes narrowing as she watched Kelly squirm. Tyler Hayes lingered near the galley, his tray forgotten, his hazel eyes wide with something between awe and dread. Jasmine didn't respond right away. She adjusted Ava's blanket, her movements slow, deliberate, letting the silence stretch until it pressed against Kelly like a physical weight. Then she looked up, her gaze locking onto Kelly's, and her voice came soft but razor-sharp, slicing through the cabin. "A misunderstanding?" Kelly blinked, caught off guard. "Too misjudged the situation," she stammered, her hands clenching into fists. "I thought." "You thought," Jasmine interrupted, her tone still quiet but now laced with steel, "that I didn't belong here. You didn't ask anyone else to move. You didn't tell Mike to put his whiskey away when he grumbled. You saw me, a black woman with a baby, and decided I was the problem. That wasn't a misunderstanding, Kelly. That was your choice." The cabin inhaled as one, a collective gasp swallowed by the hum of the engines. Kelly's face flushed crimson, her mouth opening and closing like a fish yanked from water. Mike shifted, his seat creaking, his eyes dropping to the floor as if he could hide from the heat of Jasmine's words. Sarah's faint smile widened, a nod of approval she didn't bother hiding. The man in 3B zoomed his phone closer, muttering, "Holy shit," under his breath, while the woman in 2C leaned forward, glasses slipping down her nose. Kelly swallowed hard, her voice trembling as she tried to recover. "I didn't mean it like that. I was wrong. I'm sorry." Jasmine tilted her head, her eyes never leaving Kelly's. "You're sorry because you got caught," she said, each word a deliberate step on crumbling ground. "You spoke loud enough for everyone to hear when you scolded me. You wanted them to judge me too. But now," she paused, letting the question hang, "now you're quiet. Why is that?" The silence was suffocating, thick with the weight of truth laid bare. Kelly's knees buckled slightly, her hands gripping the edge of Jasmine's seat for balance. She had no answer, none that wouldn't bury her deeper. The passengers didn't either, but their eyes spoke volumes. Guilt in some, fury in others, curiosity in most. Phones flashed, screens reflecting the scene like mirrors of a courtroom no one had expected to witness. Then Sarah broke the quiet, her voice cutting through like a whip. "She's right," she said, leaning forward. "You didn't hesitate to humiliate her, but now you're shaking. If you were really sorry, you'd have stopped the second she stood up to you." Kelly's head snapped toward Sarah, her composure shattering. "I said I was wrong," she snapped, her voice rising, desperate. "What more do you want?" "Accountability," Jasmine said, her calm unshaken, her words a quiet hammer. "Not just words. You don't get to decide who fits in first class based on how they look. You don't get to shame me for feeding my daughter and call it a mistake after the fact. The cabin erupted not in shouts, but in a swell of voices, a tide turning fast. Damn right, the man in 3 called, his tone sharp. Leave her alone already, a woman in 2C added, her glasses glinting as she nodded. Mike shrank further into his seat, his bravado dissolving as a passenger in 3B jeered. Hey tough guy, still want her to move? The taunt drew a ripple of laughter, bitter and pointed, and Mike's face burned red, his empty glass a useless shield. Kelly's eyes darted around, panic clawing at her throat. She was drowning, and the lifeboat she'd counted on her authority was sinking beneath her. Two didn't mean, she started, but the words choked off as Tyler Hayes stepped forward, his gangly frame trembling but resolute. She didn't do anything wrong, Tyler said, his voice shaky but clear, cutting through the chaos. You went after her, Kelly. I saw it. You always do this, watch certain people more, judge them faster. I've seen it before, but this time. He paused, swallowing hard, then met Jasmine's gaze. This time it's too much. The cabin stilled again, Tyler's words a bombshell no one saw coming. Kelly whirled on him, her fury reigniting. You're out of line, Tyler. You're new, you don't know what you're talking about. I know what I saw, he shot back, his voice steadying, his hands no longer shaking. You picked her out. You made it personal. And now you're scared because she's not just anyone. The passengers roared literal cheers this time, a wave crashing over Kelly's last defenses. Tell her, kid, the man in 3B shouted, pumping a fist. Sarah clapped, slow and deliberate, her smile wide. The woman in 2C adjusted her glasses, nodding fiercely. Even the businessman with the AirPods pulled them out, grinning like he'd just witnessed a knockout punch. Kelly stumbled back, her heels catching on the carpet, her face a mask of shock and humiliation. She looked at Jasmine, then Tyler, then the sea of faces, some filming, some cheering, some just watching with cold judgment. Her world was unraveling thread by thread, and she had no one to blame but herself. Jasmine didn't smile, didn't gloat. She sat back down, cradling Ava, her expression still calm but now edged with something deeper, clarity, maybe, or power earned through silence. Your tone says more than your apology ever will, she said quietly, her words for Kelly alone but loud enough to carry. Remember that. Kelly nodded, a jerky, defeated motion, then turned and fled down the aisle, her heels clicking, a retreat no one could mistake. She reached the galley and disappeared behind the curtain, her shoulders hunched, her hands gripping the counter as if it could hold her upright. Tyler stayed where he was, breathing hard, his face flushed with a mix of fear and pride. Sarah gave him a nod, a silent well done, that he caught and held on to. The cabin buzzed, alive with chatter and motion, passengers replaying videos, swapping comments, some even applauding Jasmine as if she just delivered a speech. Mike stayed silent, his head down, his whiskey glass a forgotten relic. The storm outside rumbled, but its fury paled against the fire that had swept through first class. Jasmine glanced at her bag where her phone lay silent, its screen dark. She didn't know Ethan's call had sparked this, didn't know Kelly's fate was already sealed. But she felt the shift, the weight lifting, the air clearing, the power tilting back where it belonged. She brushed a kiss on Ava's forehead, whispering, "We're okay, baby," and let herself exhale. In the galley, Kelly stood alone, her reflection staring back from the stainless steel counterpane, shaken, a stranger to herself. She didn't hear the captain's next call, didn't see the security team waiting at the gate. But she felt it coming, a reckoning she couldn't outrun. And in 1C, Jasmine's phone buzzed once, twice, a message from Ethan glowing unread. Handled it. You're safe. Land soon. The storm wasn't over, not yet, but the lightning had struck, and the cabin would never be the same. The first-class cabin of Flight 223 simmered in the aftermath of a storm no one had seen coming, not the one outside, still snarling through the clouds, but the one that had just torn through the leather seats and polished trays. The air buzzed with the low hum of victory, a current running through the passengers who'd witnessed Kelly Sanders' retreat. Her heels had faded into the galley, her shadow swallowed by the curtain, but the echo of her defeat lingered like smoke after a fire. Jasmine Carter sat in 1C, Ava dozing against her chest, her own breath steady now, the weight of the confrontation lifting like a fog burned off by the sun. The passengers weren't quiet anymore. The man in 3B replayed his video, grinning as he muttered, "This is gold, pure gold." Sarah Lopez leaned across the aisle, her voice warm but firm. "You handled that like a queen," she said, nodding at Jasmine. "She didn't stand a chance." Tyler Hayes lingered near the galley's edge, his gangly frame straighter now, his hazel eyes bright with a pride he hadn't known he could feel. Even Mike Dawson, slumped in 1D, stayed silent, his whiskey glass abandoned, his ruddy face buried in his hands as if he could erase the jeers still ringing in his ears. Jasmine offered Sarah a small smile, a flicker of gratitude, but didn't speak. She didn't need to. The cabin had spoken for her cheers, nods, the slow clap from 3A that had swelled into a wave. She brushed a finger over Ava's cheek, the baby's soft skin a tether to something real, something untouched by the chaos. Her phone buzzed in her bag, but she didn't reach for it, not yet. She wanted this moment, this quiet after the roar, to settle in her bones. Outside, the storm eased, the plane slicing through thinning clouds as it began its descent into LAX. The fasten seatbelt sign blinked on with a soft ding, and Captain Reese's voice crackled over the intercom, steady as ever. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're starting our final approach. Please remain seated. We'll be on the ground in 15 minutes. Thank you for your patience." No mention of Kelly. No hint of the drama, just the calm of a man who'd seen worse and knew how to steer through it. But the passengers knew. They felt its shift, the unspoken promise of something waiting at the gate. Phones stayed out, thumbs tapping screens, some already posting snippets of the showdown with captions like, "Flight attendant gets owned," and "Mom shuts down first-class snob." The cabin vibrated with a strange energy, not the restless irritation of the delay, but a shared awareness that they'd been part of something bigger than a flight. In the galley, Kelly stood alone, her back to the curtain, her hands gripping the steel counter so hard her knuckles blanched white. Her reflection stared back from the polished surface, pale, hollow, a stranger wearing her uniform. Her chest heaved, shallow breaths fighting the panic clawing up her throat. She'd heard the cheers, felt the weight of Tyler's words. "You always do this," cutting deeper than any passenger's taunt. She wanted to scream, to march back out and reclaim her authority, but the cockpit's order pinned her like a butterfly to a board. Apologize or be done. She'd chosen the former, and it hadn't saved her. The intercom buzzed again, this time a private line to the galley. Reese's voice was curt. "Kelly, stay put. Security's meeting us at the gate. Don't move until they get here." She flinched, the words a cold slap, and nodded at the empty air, her voice lost somewhere she couldn't find it. She knew what was coming, knew it the moment Ethan's voice had sliced through the cockpit speaker. This wasn't just a reprimand. This was the end. The plane touched down with a jolt, tires screeching against the wet runway, the storm's last gasps fading into a drizzle. The cabin rocked gently as it taxied to the gate, and the seatbelt sign blinked off with another soft ding. Passengers stirred, reaching for bags, but their eyes stayed sharp, darting toward the galley, the door, anywhere the next act might unfold. Jasmine adjusted Ava, patting her back as the baby stirred, her tiny eyes fluttering open. She whispered, "Almost home, sweet girl," and reached for her bag, pulling out her phone. The screen glowed with Ethan's message. "Handled it. You're safe. Land soon." She stared at it, piecing it together, the captain's call, Kelly's sudden summons, the forced apology. Ethan. Her ex-husband, her business partner, the man who'd built this airline with her before their marriage cracked. He hadn't been on the plane, but he'd been there, pulling strings from the ground. She typed a quick reply, "Thanks. We're okay," and slid the phone back, her mind spinning but her face still calm. The cabin door hissed open, and a ripple ran through the passengers. Two men in black suits stepped aboard, their badges glinting under the lights, followed by a woman in a navy blazer, corporate, not crew, her expression all business. They didn't smile, didn't greet anyone, just scanned the cabin with practiced efficiency. The lead officer's voice was firm, cutting through the chatter. "Kelly Sanders, lead flight attendant. Where is she?" Tyler stepped forward, his voice steady now. "Galley," he said, pointing. "She's back there." The officers nodded and moved past him, the woman trailing behind, her heels silent on the carpet. Kelly emerged as if summoned by fate, her posture stiff, her face drained of color. "That's me," she said, her voice a ghost of its former sharpness. The lead officer gave her a curt nod. "You're coming with us." Incident review. Immediate questioning. She didn't resist, didn't argue, just followed, her head down, her steps heavy as they led her through the aisle. Passengers parted like a sea, some staring openly, others looking away, their phones still capturing the quiet march of her disgrace. Jasmine watched her go, her expression unreadable. Kelly's eyes flicked to her for a heartbeat, a flash of something, fear, shame, maybe regret, before dropping to the floor. Then she was gone, the door swallowing her up, the officers a dark frame around her fading silhouette. The cabin exhaled, a collective release of tension, and the deplaning began, slow, cautious, as if no one wanted to break the spell. Sarah stood, slinging her bag over her shoulder, and gave Jasmine a parting nod. "You're a badass," she said, grinning, then strode off. Tyler lingered, offering a shy smile. "I'm glad you're okay," he said, then hurried to help an elderly passenger with her carry-on. Mike slunk out last, head low, avoiding eye contact, his bravado buried somewhere beneath the jeers he couldn't unhear. The man in 3B gave Jasmine a thumbs up as he passed, his video already uploaded, the views ticking up by the second. Jasmine waited, letting the cabin clear, then stood with Ava, her bag slung over her shoulder. She stepped into the jet bridge, the cool air a shock after the cabin's heat, and there he was, Ethan Brooks, leaning against the wall, his charcoal suit rumpled, his dark eyes scanning her with a mix of relief and something softer. At 35, he still carried the quiet intensity that had drawn her to him years ago, before the fights, before the divorce. He straightened as she approached, taking her bag without a word and brushing a kiss on Ava's forehead. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low, rough with the edge of someone who'd been pacing the terminal for hours. "We're fine," Jasmine said, meeting his gaze. "You didn't have to." "I did." He cut in, gentle but firm. She crossed a line. "You're not just anyone, Jazz. You're—" He stopped, the words "my wife" almost slipping out before he caught them. "You're Ava's mom. And you own half this airline. She doesn't get to treat you like that." Jasmine nodded, too tired to argue, too steady to lean on him. "What happens now?" "They're questioning her," he said, glancing toward the security doors down the hall. "I've got legal on it. She's done suspension at least, maybe more. This isn't over yet." He paused, searching her face. "You sure you're okay?" She looked at Ava, then back at him, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "I am now." She started walking, Ethan falling into step beside her, and the terminal stretched ahead, bright, loud, a world waiting to hear what she'd done. Behind those security doors, Kelly sat in a stark room, her career slipping through her fingers. And in the air, the storm finally broke, leaving only clear skies, and a story that wouldn't stay quiet. The terminal at LAX buzzed with the chaos of a late-night arrival, announcements crackling overhead, luggage wheels clattering against tile, travelers weaving through the crowd with bleary eyes and hurried steps. Jasmine Carter moved through it all like a quiet current, Ava nestled in her arms, Her navy blazer slightly wrinkled but her posture unbroken. Beside her, Ethan Brooks matched her pace, his charcoal suit creased from hours of waiting, his dark eyes fixed ahead as if he could see the storm still simmering beneath the surface. The jet bridge had spat them out into this fluorescent-lit world, but the echoes of Flight 223 lingered, the cheers, the jeers, Kelly's retreat like a song stuck in their heads. Jasmine didn't speak as they walked, her mind still turning over the cabin's roar, Tyler's shaky courage, Sarah's fierce nod. She'd won something back there, not just a fight, but a piece of herself she hadn't known she'd lost, the right to exist without apology. Ethan glanced at her, his jaw tight, his silence a shield around the words he wasn't ready to say. He'd promised more than Kelly's suspension promised a reckoning, and she trusted him to deliver, not because they were still married, but because he'd seen the same fire in her that had built this airline from nothing. They reached the glass doors to the executive lounge, a sleek oasis tucked away from the terminal's clamor. Ethan swiped his card, and the doors slid open, revealing soft leather chairs, a wall of windows overlooking the tarmac, and a hush that felt like a deep breath. He set Jasmine's bag on a table, pulling out his phone as she settled into a seat, Ava stirring slightly against her chest. "Legal's got her in a room now," Ethan said, scrolling through messages, his voice low but edged with steel. "Security handed her off 10 minutes ago. They're pulling her file, every complaint, every write-up. This isn't her first strike." Jasmine looked up, her dark eyes steady. "She's done this before?" Ethan nodded, his thumb pausing on the screen. "Not this loud, not this public, but yeah. Minor stuff, passengers flagged for attitude, dress code nitpicks, extra scrutiny on certain people. Quiet enough to slide under the radar. Until you." She exhaled, a slow release of something heavy. "I wasn't trying to start a war." "You didn't," he said, meeting her gaze. "She did. And I'm ending it." He tapped a message, then set the phone down, leaning forward. "This isn't just about her, Jazz. It's the system, how we train, who we hire, what we let slide. I'm not letting it happen again." Jasmine didn't reply right away, just rocked Ava gently, her mind tracing the edges of his words. She'd felt it on the plane, the unspoken rules, the weight of Kelly's assumptions, the silence of passengers who'd looked away until she'd forced them to see. Ethan was right. It wasn't just one woman's mistake. It was a crack in the foundation, and they had the power to fix it. Across the airport, in a stark holding room with gray walls and a single table, Kelly Sanders sat under the fluorescent glare, her navy uniform a wrinkled shell around her. The two security officers stood by the door, arms crossed, their badges catching the light. The woman in the navy blazer, Marissa Cole, head of HR, sat across from her, a tablet open, her expression cold but professional. Kelly's hands rested in her lap, trembling slightly, her once sharp voice reduced to a whisper in her throat. "Let's start with the incident," Marissa said, her tone clipped, no room for evasion. "Flight 223 first class. You confronted Jasmine Carter for breastfeeding. Walk me through it." Kelly swallowed, her eyes fixed on the table. I thought it was disruptive. A passenger, Mike Dawson, complained. I asked her to cover up or move. It's first class, there's a standard." Marissa's eyebrow lifted. "A standard? Did she violate any policy?" "No," Kelly admitted, her voice barely audible. "Not technically." "Then why her?" Marissa pressed, tapping the tablet. "You didn't ask Dawson to lower his voice when he grumbled. You didn't move anyone else. Why Jasmine?" Kelly's lips parted, then closed, her mind scrambling for a defense that wouldn't come. "I don't know," she lied, her hands clenching. "It just felt off." Marissa leaned forward, her gaze piercing. "Felt off? That's what you're going with?" She swiped the tablet, pulling up a file. 3 complaints in the last 2 years, passengers cited for inappropriate behavior. All women, all minorities, all dismissed as overreactions. Sound familiar? Kelly's face drained of color, her breath hitching. I wasn't targeting anyone. You were, Marissa said, her voice flat. And today you picked the wrong target. Jasmine Carter co-owns this airline. You didn't just embarrass her, you embarrassed us. On video. It's already online. Kelly's head jerked up, panic flashing in her eyes. Online. Trending, Marissa said, turning the tablet to show a clip. Jasmine's calm defiance, Tyler's stand, the cabin's cheers. Over 50,000 views in an hour. You're the face of it, Kelly. And not in a good way. She sank back, her hands trembling harder, the reality crashing down like a wave she couldn't outrun. What happens now? She whispered. Suspension, Marissa said, closing the tablet. Pending a full review. But with this pattern, don't expect to fly again. Not with us. She stood, nodding to the officers. We're done here. Kelly didn't move as they escorted her out, her career slipping away like sand through her fingers. The door shut behind her, a final thud that echoed in the empty room. Back in the lounge, Ethan's phone buzzed. A message from legal. Suspension confirmed. Record review in progress. Press is sniffing. He showed it to Jasmine, his jaw tightening. It's out there now. We need to move fast. She nodded, shifting Ava to her shoulder. What's the plan? New policies, he said, pulling a notepad from his jacket, already scribbled with notes. Mandatory bias training, real training, not check the box crap. Clear rules. No mother gets questioned for feeding her kid, anywhere on the plane. Anonymous reporting for passengers straight to us, no middlemen. And we're auditing the crew top to bottom. Jasmine scanned the list, her eyes lingering on the last line. Dignity over decorum. All this from one flight? No, he said, his voice softening. From you. You didn't just stand up to her, you showed us what we've been missing. I'm not letting it fade. She looked at him, really looked, and saw the man she built this airline with, the one who'd fought beside her before the cracks came. Don't make it about me, she said. Make it about every woman who's sat where I did, every passenger who's felt that stare. That's what matters. Ethan nodded, scribbling her words into the margins. Done. I'm meeting the board tomorrow. This goes live by the end of the week. Statement, policies, all of it. No hiding. She leaned back, Ava's weight a comfort against her chest, and let the silence settle. Outside, planes taxied across the tarmac, their lights blinking in the drizzle. A world moving on while theirs shifted beneath them. She didn't feel victorious, not yet, just steady, like a stone finally settled after a flood. Ethan stood, pocketing his phone. I'll handle the rest tonight. Get some sleep, Jazz. You've done enough. Not yet, she said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. But I will. She rose, cradling Ava, and walked toward the exit, Ethan trailing her like a shadow she didn't mind. The lounge doors slid shut behind them, sealing the promise of change in the quiet they left behind. Across town, in a dimly lit apartment, Kelly sat on her couch, still in her uniform, the jacket crumpled beside her. Her phone glowed with notifications, texts from coworkers, a news alert. Flight attendant suspended after viral confrontation. She didn't open them. She stared at the wall, replaying Jasmine's words. You saw me, you decided I was the problem, and felt them sink into her like thorns she couldn't pull out. For the first time, she didn't push them away. At the airline's headquarters, Ethan's team gathered in a glass-walled office, laptops open, drafting the statement that would hit the wires by morning. Today we failed a passenger. Tomorrow we fix it for everyone. The words weren't just pure, they were a line in the sand, drawn by a woman who'd refused to move. And in the terminal, as Jasmine stepped into the night, the drizzle kissed her face, cool and clean. She didn't know the videos were spreading, didn't know the board was waiting, didn't know her stand was already rippling beyond the runway. But she felt Ida spark, small but fierce, lighting a path she hadn't planned to take. The morning sun sliced through the glass walls of the airline's headquarters, casting long shadows across a conference room buzzing with quiet urgency. Ethan Brooks stood at the head of the table, his charcoal suit swapped for a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, a man who'd spent the night forging a new path instead of sleeping. Around him, the executive team, legal advisors, HR leads, PR specialists huddled over laptops and coffee cups, their faces lit by the glow of screens displaying drafts, data, and a headline already spreading like wildfire. Airline suspends attendant after viral breastfeeding clash. The clock on the wall ticked past 7 a.m., but the room felt timeless, suspended in the gravity of what they were about to unleash. Ethan tapped a pen against the table, his dark eyes scanning the final statement on his tablet. Today we failed a passenger, a mother, a co-owner, a human being, he read aloud, his voice steady, cutting through the hum of keyboards. That failure ends here. We're introducing policies to ensure dignity flies first class. Every time, zero tolerance for bias, full protection for mothers, and accountability from gate to galley. He paused, glancing at the team. This goes out in an hour. No edits. It's done. Marissa Cole, the HR head who'd questioned Kelly the night before, nodded from her seat, her navy blazer crisp against the chaos of papers around her. Press is already calling, she said, her tone brisk. The video's at 200,000 views. We're trending on X-Flight 223. Jasmine Carter. We need to own this before they spin it. Agreed, said Priya Patel, the PR lead, her fingers flying across her laptop. We're not defending. We're leading. The policy drafts attach training overhaul, passenger reporting app, crew audits. It's bold, but it's right. Ethan set the tablet down, his jaw tight. It's not bold enough until it sticks. Jasmine didn't just call out Kelly, she called out us. Every passenger who's felt that look, that tone deserves this. He thought of her in the lounge last night. Ava in her arms, her quiet insistence, make it about everyone, and felt it fuel him like a vow he wouldn't break. Across town, in a modest apartment with drawn curtains, Kelly Sanders sat on her couch, still in the sweats she'd thrown on after peeling off her uniform. The TV flickered silently, a news ticker scrolling. Flight attendant faces backlash after viral video. Her phone lay dark beside her, its battery dead from ignored calls, coworkers, friends, a reporter who'd somehow gotten her number. She didn't need to see the messages to know what they said. She felt it in the hollow ache in her chest, the weight of Jasmine's words. You saw me, you decided I was the problem, looping in her mind like a punishment she couldn't mute. She picked up a chipped mug of cold coffee, staring at the brown ring inside. Last night she'd wanted to blame someone, Jasmine, Tyler, even Ethan, but now, in the stark light of morning, the mirror was unavoidable. Tyler's accusation, you always do this, had cracked something open. A truth she buried under years of clipped efficiency and unwritten rules. She judged, quietly, consistently, not with malice but with instinct, and no one had stopped her. Until yesterday. Her laptop sat on the coffee table, open to an email from HR. Suspension extended. Disciplinary hearing scheduled Friday. Prepare a statement. She hadn't touched it. What could she say? That she was sorry? She was, but not just for losing her job. For the first time, she saw the faces behind her snap decisions, the woman in coat she'd scolded for a loud laugh, the man she'd eyed for his worn jacket, and felt the shame settle like dust she couldn't sweep away. Back at headquarters, the statement hit the wires at 8 a.m., a digital shockwave that rippled across news feeds and social platforms. We apologize to Jasmine Carter and every passenger we've failed. It began raw and unpolished, a corporate voice turned human. X lit up finally, an airline gets it, one user posted. Too late, but better than nothing, another replied. The video surged past 300,000 views. Clips of Jasmine's calm defiance and Tyler's stand shared with captions like, "This is how you fight back." By noon, the ripple reached beyond the airline. A rival CEO, David Langston of Horizon Air, sat in his corner office, scrolling through the footage on his tablet. At 60, he'd built his career on efficiency, not empathy, but something about Jasmine's quiet strength. The way she'd held her ground without raising her voice stuck with him. He called his VP of operations, his tone gruff. "We've got policies on this, right? Breastfeeding bias." Sort of, the VP hedged. "It's vague, discretion advised. No training, though." "Fix it," Langston snapped. "I don't want us on the wrong side of this. Rewrite a clear rules, no ambiguity. And get me a draft by tomorrow." He hung up, staring at the screen, a grudging respect flickering in his chest. One woman, one flight, and the industry was shifting under his feet. At home in her LA apartment, Jasmine Carter stood by the window, Ava napping in her crib, the city sprawling below in a haze of sun and smog. She hadn't seen the statement yet and checked her phone since Ethan's last text. "It's live. Call if you need me." She didn't need to. She felt it brewing, a quiet hum in the air. Like the world was waking up to what she'd known all along. Dignity wasn't negotiable. The doorbell buzzed and she opened it to find a delivery, a small box with a note. From Sarah Lopez to A. "You're a hero." Inside was a silk scarf, vibrant red. A match to the one Sarah had worn on the plane. Jasmine smiled, draping it over her shoulder, and turned on her phone. The screen flooded texts from friends, a news alert, a message from Tyler. "Thank you for not backing down. I'm proud I spoke up." She scrolled to Ethan's statement, reading it slowly, her breath catching at "Dignity flies first class every time." She set the phone down, stepping to Ava's crib, and whispered, "We did that, baby girl." The words weren't loud, but they carried a promise kept, a spark fanned into flame. That afternoon, Ethan faced the board in a sleek room overlooking the runway, the policy draft projected on a screen behind him. The suits around the table gray-haired, skeptical, shifted uncomfortably as he laid it out. "Training overhaul, passenger rights, zero tolerance." "This isn't PR," he said, his voice firm. "It's who we are now. Jasmine showed us what we'd ignored. We don't get to look away anymore." A board member, Carl Hensley, leaned forward, his tie loose. "This'll cost us training, audits, pushback from the old guard. You sure it's worth it?" Ethan didn't blink. "Cost us more to do nothing. That video's not dying, it's growing. Passengers want this. Employees too. Tyler Hayes proved that." He tapped the screen, the policy glowing. "We lead or we follow. Pick one." The room went quiet. Then Hensley nodded, a reluctant concession. "Fine. Roll it out. But keep it tight, no leaks." "It's already out," Ethan said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "And it's working." By evening, the news hit major outlets. Airline overhauls policies after viral incident. And the ripple spread. A travel blogger posted, "Saw it live on Flight 223. Jasmine Carter didn't just win, she changed the game." Parents emailed the airline praising the shift. A flight crew forum buzzed with cautious hope. Horizon Air's draft leaked online, sparking rumors of a wider industry push. Kelly saw it too, flipping on her TV as CNN ran the story. "A mother's stand prompts reform." She muted it, staring at Jasmine's name on the ticker, and felt something shift, not anger, not blame, but a hollow clarity. She opened her laptop, typing a draft she'd never send. "I'm sorry. Not for my job, but for what I didn't see." She closed it, the words unsent, but the weight lighter just a fraction. At headquarters, Ethan watched the runway lights blink in the dusk, his phone buzzing with updates: policy approved, training scheduled, press conference set. He texted Jasmine, "It's real now. You started this." Her reply came fast, "We finish it together." The ripple wasn't done. It was swelling, reaching gates and skies beyond LX. A wave no one could stop, not Kelly, not the board, not the industry itself. And at its heart was a woman who'd stood still, held her child, and let the world move around her. The sun dipped low over Los Angeles, painting the sky in streaks of gold and lavender, a quiet promise after days of storm and upheaval. Jasmine Carter stood in her small apartment, the city's hum a distant murmur through the open window. Ava slept in her crib, tiny chest rising and falling, her soft curls spilling over the pillow, a picture of peace that belied the whirlwind her mother had ignited. Jasmine leaned against the counter, a mug of tea steaming in her hands, the red scarf from Sarah Lopez draped over her shoulders like a badge she hadn't asked for but wore anyway. Her phone lay silent now, its screen dark after hours of buzzing texts, news alerts, a world catching up to what she'd done on Flight 223. She hadn't sought the spotlight. She'd only wanted to feed her daughter, to sit in the seat she'd earned, to be left alone. But that moment, standing against Kelly Sanders' judgment, facing Mike Dawson's sneers, holding Ava through the cabin's roar, had cracked open something bigger, something she couldn't unmake. The news had called it a movement. X dubbed it Jasmine Carter, and Ethan's statement had turned it into policy. She didn't feel like a hero, just a mother who'd refused to shrink. Yet here she was, the eye of a storm she'd never planned to stir. Across the city, at the airline's headquarters, Ethan Brooks paced a glass-walled office, the runway lights twinkling below like stars tethered to earth. His white shirt was rumpled now, tie long discarded, but his dark eyes burned with a focus that hadn't wavered since the board signed off. The policy rollout was live training modules uploaded, crew schedules redrawn, a passenger app in beta testing. The press conference that morning had been a blur of cameras and questions, his voice steady as he declared, "This isn't a reaction, it's a reset. Dignity isn't optional." The room had nodded, some skeptics won over, others still grumbling about costs, but the tide had turned. He felt it. His phone buzzed, a message from Priya in PR. "App downloads up 10,000. Parents love it. Rivals are copying us." He smiled, a rare crack in his intensity, and texted Jasmine, "It's working. You were right, everyone matters." Her reply came soft, steady. "Keep it real. That's all I ask." He pocketed the phone, staring out at the planes taxiing in the dusk, and knew this was only the beginning. A week had passed since Flight 223, but the echoes hadn't faded, they'd grown. News outlets ran features. Mother Stan Sparks' airline reform on CNN, the quiet power of Jasmine Carter in the Times. Parenting blogs erupted with stories. "I hid in a bathroom to nurse on a flight in 19, and flight crews posted anonymously. We've seen this too long. Time to change." The video hit 1 million views. Tyler Hayes' shaky courage and Jasmine's calm defiance replayed across screens worldwide. Horizon Air announced its own policy shift, a ripple spreading to others, whispers of an industry pact taking shape. Jasmine hadn't spoken publicly. She'd turned down interviews, ignored the clamor, stayed home with Ava, letting Ethan's voice carry the fight. But the world found her anyway. Notes slipped under her door. Emails from strangers. "Thank you for making me feel seen." A barista at her coffee shop had recognized her, whispering, "You're the plane mom, right? My sister cried reading about you." She'd smiled, nodded, and kept moving, the weight of it settling like a cloak she was still learning to wear. That evening her phone pinged with an email, the subject line stopping her cold. From Kelly Sanders. She hesitated, tea cooling in her hands, then opened it, her breath catching at the rawness of the words. "Mrs. Carter, I know you don't owe me your time. I'm writing this because I owe you something, truth, maybe, or just the decency I didn't show you. I lost my job yesterday. Hearing was Friday. They found the pattern Marissa warned me about, the complaints I thought didn't matter. I earned it, and I'm not asking for pity. I'm asking you to know I see it now, what I did, who I was. You didn't yell, didn't curse, just stood there with your baby and broke me open. I judged you because you didn't fit my picture of first class. I've done it before, too many times, and I didn't think it was wrong until you made me hear it. I'm starting therapy tomorrow, not to save my career, but to fix what's left of me. My daughter's 5. I want her to see a mother who learned, even if it's late. Thank you for not moving, for being louder in silence than I ever was with words. I'm sorry truly. Kelly. Jasmine read it twice, her chest tight. Not with triumph but with something softer, grace, maybe, or recognition. Kelly's words mirrored the ones she'd heard in her head that day, you saw me. But now they turned inward. A mirror held up to a woman who'd fallen and was clawing her way back. She typed a reply, simple, steady. Change matters most when it's hard. Good luck to you and your daughter. She hit send, set the phone down, and let the quiet wrap around her. At headquarters, Ethan gathered his leadership team in a late-night huddle, the room lit by screens showing metrics training sign-ups spiking, passenger feedback flooding in, rival airlines scrambling to match their pace. He leaned against the table, his voice low but firm. We're not done, he said. This isn't a win, it's a start. Jasmine didn't fight for applause. She fought for the ones who can't. We honor that by digging deeper every crew, every flight, every gate. No exceptions. A senior manager, Lisa Tran, nodded, her tablet glowing with notes. Crews on board. Tyler Hayes even volunteered to lead a session. Says he learned more from her than any manual. Ethan's lips twitched, a ghost of a smile. Good. Let him. He earned it. He glanced out the window, the runway a ribbon of light, and felt Jasmine's presence in the room, not loud, not showy, just there, steady as stone. Days turned to weeks and the echoes grew louder. The airline rolled out its first training class, a module called the Carter Standard, no fluff, just real stories, real questions. Who do you see? Who do you miss? Passengers downloaded the app, reporting slights and praises alike, a quiet revolution in their hands. Rival CEOs signed a pact passenger dignity initiative, and the FAA took notice, murmuring about new guidelines. The Amina effect, they called it in headlines, but Jasmine didn't claim it. She didn't need to. She spoke once at Ethan's urging to a room of crew leaders, a small group. No cameras, just faces like Tyler's, eager and raw. I didn't yell, she said, her voice soft but clear, because I didn't have to. You have power not in your badge but in your choice. See the person, not the seat. That's all it takes. They stood when she finished, not clapping, just rising. A silent vow that followed her out the door. Kelly started therapy, sitting across from a woman who asked hard questions. Why her? Why then? And she answered slowly, peeling back layers she'd ignored for years. She didn't fly again, didn't want to. But she took a job at a community center, teaching kids manners she was still learning herself. Her daughter watched wide-eyed as she changed, one quiet step at a time. Ethan kept pushing more reforms, more voices. A company remade not by force but by will. He texted Jasmine late one night. They're calling it your standard. You okay with that? She replied, standing by Ava's crib. Call it what they want. I'll keep showing up. The story didn't fade. It lived in the app's ping, the crew's nods, the mothers who flew without fear. Jasmine walked through LAX weeks later, Ava in a stroller, and felt eyes not judging but seeing. A gate agent smiled, a passenger whispered, "Thank you," and she nodded, moving forward, the red scarf bright against her shoulder. The sky stretched clear above, no storms in sight, but the echo of Flight 223 rang on a mother's stand, a company's shift, an industry's wake-up call. Jasmine didn't look back. She didn't need to. The world had moved with her, and that was enough. And there you have it, Jasmine Carter, the mom who turned a first-class seat into a revolution, proving you don't need a megaphone when you've got a spine and a sleepy baby. Let's be real. In 2025, we're still arguing over who gets to exist without a side-eye in planes, in coffee shops, at the grocery store. Ever tried feeding a kid in public and felt like you're auditioning for America's Most Wanted? Yeah, Jasmine's been there. And she didn't just survive the glarish rewired an airline while the rest of us were still fumbling with our seatbelts. Here's the funny part. Kelly thought she was the queen of the skies, but it turns out her crown was made of paper and Jasmine had the match. Lesson. Don't judge a book by its blanket, folks, because that disruptive mom might just own the plane you're flying on. We've all got our Kelly moment snap judgments we'd rather not admit, but the trick is catching yourself before you're trending for the wrong reasons. In a world of viral videos and X-rants, maybe it's time we all ask, who am I sizing up today and why? So what about you? Ever faced a Kelly or been one? Drop your story in the comments. I'm dying to hear how you handled it, or didn't. Did you channel Jasmine's cool? Or did you go full mic and hide behind your whiskey? No judgment here, well, maybe a little, but it's the fun kind. If this tale of turbulence and triumph hit you in the feels, don't just sit there, smash that like button, share it with your crew, and subscribe to the channel. We've got more stories coming your way, packed with heroes, villains, and the occasional snack cart drama. Hit that bell so you don't miss out, because trust me, the next flight's gonna be wild. See you in the skies, or at least in the comments.